Operation Compass, and the birth of the North African Campaign, September 1940, February 1941. On December 9, 1940, as the first pale light of dawn breaks across the Libyan desert, 30,000 Italian soldiers of the 10th Army wake to what they believe will be another quiet morning. They stretch, light cigarettes, and prepare coffee in their fortified camps stretching across 60 miles of North African wasteland. In the distance, beyond the scrubland and rocky outcrops, British positions sit silent. For months, these two armies have faced each other in an uneasy stalemate, trading occasional artillery shells but nothing more. The Italians outnumber their British adversaries 3-1. Their commander, Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, has constructed an impressive chain of fortified camps, Nibiwa, Tummer, Sidi Barrani, each one a miniature fortress bristling with artillery and protected by minefields. But at precisely 5:00 a.m. the desert erupts. 70 British artillery pieces shatter the morning silence with a bombardment so intense that Italian soldiers cannot hear their own officers screaming orders. Through the dust and smoke, an armored force of just 200 tanks, many of them obsolete, begins rolling forward. This is Operation Compass, and within 72 hours, it will shatter an entire Italian army and drag Adolf Hitler into a theater of war he never wanted to fight. The question hanging in the pre-dawn darkness is simple. How did the most powerful man in Europe find himself forced into the unforgiving furnace of North Africa? To understand this moment, we must rewind 4 months. On September 13, 1940, Marshal Graziani reluctantly orders his forces across the Libyan-Egyptian border. Reluctantly, because Graziani knows his army is unprepared for offensive operations. But Benito Mussolini, Italy's dictator and architect of fascist ambition, has been seething with jealousy. Hitler's Wehrmacht has conquered Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, and France in a stunning display of military prowess. Meanwhile, Italy, the nation that supposedly gave birth to ancient Rome's warrior spirit, has achieved precisely nothing of significance since entering the war in June. Mussolini craves glory. He craves headlines. He craves his own blitzkrieg. From his office in Rome, he fires off increasingly angry telegrams to Graziani in Libya. Advance into Egypt, threaten the Suez Canal, prove that Italians can match German victories. Never mind that the Italian 10th Army lacks proper logistics, suffers from low morale, and operates with equipment often inferior to their opponents. Never mind that Graziani himself warns Rome that his forces are not in condition to undertake an offensive action. Mussolini wants his triumphant parade, and Graziani must deliver it. The Italian advance manages to push 60 miles into Egypt before grinding to a halt at Sidi Barrani. There, exhausted and at the end of dangerously stretched supply lines, Graziani's men dig in. They construct a series of fortified camps, each positioned approximately 15 miles apart, a fatal decision born from water supply limitations but creating dangerous gaps that an aggressive enemy could exploit. For nearly 3 months, both sides glare at each other across barbed wire and minefields. Little do the Italians know that in Cairo, British and Commonwealth commanders are planning something audacious. General Archibald Wavell, Commander-in-Chief Middle East, faces his own pressures. Churchill demands action. The British Empire needs a victory to boost morale after the disasters of Dunkirk and the ongoing Battle of Britain. Major General Richard O'Connor, commanding Western Desert Force, proposes what appears on paper to be madness. Attack an enemy 3 times your size with an armored force that barely functions. But O'Connor has identified the fatal weakness in the Italian defensive positions, those 15-mile gaps between camps. The western desert of Egypt and Libya is not the romantic Arabian desert of popular imagination, with towering dunes and palm-fringed oases. This is a harsh, flat expanse of rock, gravel, and scrub, what the locals call the blue for its shimmering, heat-distorted horizons. During December, temperatures plummet at night, leaving soldiers shivering in inadequate blankets, only to roast under merciless sunshine by noon. There are no natural barriers here, no rivers or mountain ranges to anchor a defensive line. Success belongs to whoever can master logistics, navigation, and mechanized movement across this featureless wasteland. The Italian fortified camps represent impressive engineering. Take Nibiwa, the southernmost position. Engineers have carved defensive positions into the rocky ground, created interconnected trenches, positioned artillery pieces behind protective berms, and surrounded the entire perimeter with barbed wire and anti-tank obstacles. Several dozen M1139 tanks, Italy's main battle tank, though hopelessly obsolete compared to British armor, provide mobile defense. The camp resembles a medieval castle transplanted to the desert, designed to withstand frontal assault. But here's the fatal flaw. Nibiwa sits approximately 15 miles southwest of Tumar, the next camp in the chain. Between them lies nothing but open desert. The Italians have placed their faith in the assumption that British forces, heavily outnumbered, would never dare attempt a flanking maneuver through such exposed terrain. After all, conventional military wisdom suggests that attackers need at least 3-to-1 numerical superiority to successfully assault fortified positions. O'Connor's Western Desert Force possesses barely 30,000 men facing 90,000 Italians. Logic dictates the British should remain defensive. Logic, however, is about to take a holiday in the desert sun. The terrain that the Italians view as impassable becomes O'Connor's highway. The gaps they consider safe become killing grounds. The fortifications they trust become prisons. The desert itself, harsh, unforgiving, seemingly neutral, is about to choose a side based not on numbers but on audacity. Major General Richard O'Connor commands a force officially designated Western Desert Force, though it will later gain fame as XIII Corps. His primary striking power consists of the 7th Armored Division, the famous Desert, the 4th Indian Division. Together, they can field approximately 275 tanks, split between 50 heavily armored Matilda II infantry tanks of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment and 225 lighter cruiser tanks. The Matildas are the crown jewels. Their thick armor can shrug off most Italian anti-tank weapons, though they move with frustrating slowness. The cruiser tanks, faster but lightly armored, will provide mobility and exploitation. O'Connor himself is a soldier's soldier, 50 years old, lean and intense, with a reputation for meticulous planning and aggressive execution. He doesn't look like a man about to revolutionize desert warfare, but beneath his quiet demeanor burns an absolute conviction. Speed, surprise, and violence of action can overcome numerical disadvantage. His subordinates include some of Britain's finest. Brigadier Strafer, Gott commanding the 7th Armored Division Support Group, and Major General Noel Beresford-Pearce leading the 4th Indian Division. Facing them is Marshal Rodolfo Graziani's 10th Army, approximately 150,000 men scattered across Libya and occupied Egypt, with roughly 90,000 positioned in the forward defensive zone. The force includes elite divisions like the Blackshirt 1st CCNN, Division 23 Mars, and the regular Army's 1st Libyan Division. On paper, they field 120 tanks, 400 artillery pieces, and limitless confidence born from superior numbers. Individual Italian soldiers are brave. Many are veterans of campaigns in Ethiopia and Spain. But their equipment tells a darker story. The M1139 tank mounts its main gun in the hull rather than a turret, a design flaw that severely limits tactical flexibility. Many artillery pieces date from World War I. Logistics remain chaotic, with supply trucks frequently breaking down and fuel shortages hampering training. More critically, Italian leadership suffers from a fatal complacency. Graziani believes the British are too weak to attack. His camp commanders have grown comfortable in their fortified positions, establishing predictable routines. Guards become lax. Patrols grow infrequent. The psychological impact of sitting behind fortifications for months breeds a defensive mindset incompatible with the fluid warfare the desert demands. They might hear the occasional rumble of distant engines, but dismiss it as routine British reconnaissance. The enemy shows no signs of offensive intentions. Our positions are secure. He couldn't be more wrong. December 8th, 11:00 p.m. Under cover of complete darkness, British forces begin their approach march. The 7th Armored Division's columns navigate using compass bearings and dead reckoning, a terrifying proposition across featureless desert where a navigation error could send entire battalions wandering into oblivion. Tank commanders peer through vision slits, seeing nothing but darkness and the faint exhaust glow of the vehicle ahead. The only sounds are the grinding of tracks, the whine of engines, and the occasional shouted correction from guides. Strict radio silence means units cannot communicate except by dispatch rider. It's a technical and logistical nightmare, yet somehow the columns maintain cohesion. December 9th, 5:00 a.m. The 72 guns of the 4th Indian Division's artillery open fire on Nibiwa camp with devastating precision. Italian soldiers, many still sleeping, are caught completely unprepared. Shells tear through tent canvas, detonate ammunition dumps, and collapse dugouts. Officers stumble from their quarters, trying to understand what's happening. The bombardment isn't random harassment. It's a precisely timed curtain of fire designed to suppress defensive positions, while assault forces close the distance. At 7:00 a.m., emerging from the southwest, the direction the Italians never properly defended, 48 Matilda tanks of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment lumber into view like armored leviathans. Their thick hides deflect Italian anti-tank rounds that spark harmlessly off their frontal armor. Behind the Matildas come infantry companies of the 1st Battalion, 6th Rajputana Rifles, and the 2nd Battalion, 5th Maratha Light Infantry. These Indian troops advance with bayonets fixed, their discipline matching their courage. The Italian defenders fight desperately. Anti-tank guns engage at point-blank range, their crews standing their ground even as British tanks bear down on them. Some Italian tankettes attempt counterattacks but are systematically destroyed, their thin armor and underpowered guns utterly outmatched. General Pietro Maletti, commanding the camp's defenders, dies leading his men from the front, cut down by machine gun fire. His death symbolizes the chaos consuming Nibiwa. Without centralized command, without communications to headquarters, without any plan for this contingency, the defense collapses into isolated pockets of resistance. By 10:40 a.m., less than 4 hours after the first shells fell, Nibiwa is captured. 4,000 Italian soldiers surrender. 23 tanks lie burning. The British have achieved complete surprise and overwhelming tactical victory while suffering casualties so light they seem almost unbelievable. 8 men killed, 15 wounded. O'Connor doesn't pause to consolidate. While the 4th Indian Division secures Nibiwa, the 7th Armored Division's mobile columns race northward through the gap between camps. They're not attacking sequentially. They're collapsing the entire Italian defensive system simultaneously. It's a masterclass in exploiting success, the kind of aggressive maneuver warfare that Rommel will later perfect in this same desert. December 10th. The camps fall like dominoes. Tumor East capitulates after brief resistance. Tumor West follows. Each victory nets thousands of prisoners, dozens of guns, and mountains of supplies. Italian units that might have reinforced each other instead remain isolated in their individual fortresses, unable to coordinate a response. Some camps don't even realize they're under attack until British tanks appear on their perimeters. The psychological shock is total. How can the numerically inferior British be everywhere at once? At Sidi Barrani, the largest Italian position, confusion reigns. General Berti, commanding the position, receives fragmentary reports of disaster to the south but cannot establish the true situation. His communications to Graziani's headquarters go unanswered. The Marshal has fled westward to Salem, already contemplating wholesale retreat. British artillery and naval gunfire from HMS Bahram, steaming offshore, pound Sidi Barrani's defenses while infantry probes for weak points. December 11th, 4:30 p.m., Sidi Barrani falls. Another 14,000 Italians march into captivity. The British have punched through the entire defensive line in 72 hours, capturing positions that Italian engineers spent months fortifying. The 10th Army is in full retreat, streaming westward toward Libya in chaotic columns that stretch for miles. Tank crews abandon their vehicles when they run out of fuel. Artillery pieces are spiked and left behind. Soldiers throw away rifles to move faster. It's not an orderly withdrawal, it's a rout. The Italians came in like sheep. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, hands up, eager to surrender. We didn't have enough men to process them all. O'Connor's forces pursue relentlessly. The 7th Armored Division's reconnaissance units race ahead, cutting roads, seizing water sources, spreading panic. They move faster than Italian headquarters can react. Appearing in places they shouldn't be able to reach, capturing generals in their command posts before staff officers can burn sensitive documents. It's chaos transformed into art, the kind of operational tempo that shatters not just armies but national morale. December 16th, Salem falls. Bardia, just inside the Libyan border, comes under siege. The British have advanced over 100 miles in a week. They've captured 38,000 prisoners, 400 guns, and 50 tanks while suffering fewer than 600 casualties of their own. It's a victory so complete that even hardened military analysts struggle to find historical parallels. The numerically superior, fortified defender has been annihilated by an audacious attacker who rewrote the rulebook on desert warfare. But the campaign isn't over. Bardia holds 45,000 Italian troops and extensive fortifications. To the west lies Tobruk, another major fortress. And beyond that, the entire Cyrenaica province of Libya stretches toward Benghazi. O'Connor wants to keep attacking, to maintain momentum before the Italians can reorganize. His soldiers are exhausted, his tanks are breaking down, and his supply lines grow more precarious by the mile. Yet he pushes forward. On January 3, 1941, after intense bombardment, Australian troops of the 6th Division storm Bardia. House-to-house fighting rages through the town. Italian sailors manning coastal defense batteries fight with suicidal determination. But by January 5th, Bardia capitulates, yielding another 40,000 prisoners and 130 tanks. The Australian infantry, tough, irreverent, and brutally effective, have proven themselves masters of assault warfare. Tobruk is next. On January 21st, British forces encircle the fortress. Artillery pounds the defenses. Tanks probe for weak points. On January 22nd at 5:40 a.m., the assault begins. 24 hours of savage fighting follow before the Italian garrison commander surrenders on January 23rd. Another 25,000 prisoners, 208 guns, and 87 tanks fall into British hands. By early February 1941, O'Connor faces a crucial decision. Intelligence suggests Italian forces are abandoning Cyrenaica entirely, retreating toward Tripolitania along the coast road to Benghazi. The logical move is to follow the coast, maintaining pressure along the obvious axis of advance. But O'Connor sees a different opportunity, a gamble so audacious that if it fails, it could destroy his entire force. He orders the 7th Armored Division to cut directly across the interior desert, a 150-mile dash through trackless wasteland to reach Bidafam, a tiny village on the coast road south of Benghazi. If his tanks can get there before the retreating Italians, they'll trap the entire 10th Army. If they arrive too late, they'll find themselves out of fuel and ammunition, isolated deep behind enemy lines with Italian forces pouring south toward them. It's a race against time and logistics. British tanks thunder across the desert, navigating by sun compass, covering ground at speeds that seem impossible for machines already pushed beyond their design limits. Tracks break, engines overheat, crews survive on minimal rations and captured water, but they keep moving, driven by O'Connor's personality and the knowledge that ultimate victory lies tantalizingly close. February 5, 2:00 p.m. The first British tanks reach Badaf and establish blocking positions across the coast road. They number fewer than 30 operational vehicles, a pathetically thin force to hold against an army, but they're positioned first, which means everything in mobile warfare. Officers distribute the last ammunition, check fuel gauges showing near-empty tanks, and wait. February 5, 4:00 p.m. The first Italian columns appear moving south in dense masses. They expect open road ahead. Instead, they drive straight into a killing zone. British tanks and anti-tank guns open fire at close range. Italian vehicles explode, jackknife across the road, and create impenetrable tangles of burning wreckage. The entire Italian column, thousands of men, hundreds of vehicles, grinds to a confused halt. For 2 days, Italian forces attempt to break through at Badaf. They attack with desperate courage, tank assaults, infantry charges, artillery bombardments. Some penetrations nearly succeed. British defenders scrape together their last shells, fire until gun barrels glow red-hot, and somehow hold the line. It's the kind of stand that enters military legend, where sheer determination overcomes impossible odds. February 7th, 11:00 a.m. The Italian commander, Lieutenant General Tellera, dies attempting to rally his men for one final breakout. His death breaks the army's spirit. White flags appear along the column. By afternoon, the entire remaining 10th Army, nearly 20,000 men, 216 guns, and 120 tanks, surrenders. The road south is a graveyard of burned-out vehicles stretching for miles. Operation Compass, planned as a 5-day raid, has become a 2-month campaign of annihilation. British and Commonwealth forces have advanced 500 miles, destroyed 10 Italian divisions, and captured 130,000 prisoners, 1,300 guns, and 400 tanks while suffering fewer than 2,000 casualties. It's one of the most lopsided victories in modern military history, a masterpiece of mobile warfare that demonstrates how boldness, surprise, and relentless aggression can overcome numerical superiority. Yet even in this moment of triumph, the seeds of future complications are germinating. Churchill, thrilled by success, begins pulling forces from North Africa to send to Greece, where a German invasion threatens. O'Connor, positioned to possibly drive all the way to Tripoli and eliminate Italy's last toehold in Africa, is ordered to halt. The decision will haunt British strategy for years. The disaster of Operation Compass stems from multiple Italian failures compounding into catastrophe. Graziani's defensive dispositions were fundamentally flawed. Spreading forces in isolated camps invited defeat in detail. His intelligence network completely failed to detect British preparations. His logistics couldn't sustain mobile operations or rapid reinforcement. When crisis arrived, he demonstrated paralysis rather than decisive leadership, abandoning his army and fleeing westward. But Graziani operated under constraints that would cripple any commander. Mussolini's strategic vision, if it can be called vision rather than fantasy, forced Italy into wars it couldn't win with equipment it didn't have and logistics that didn't exist. Italian industry couldn't match British production. Italian armor was obsolete before it left factories. Italian tactics emphasized static defense in an era demanding mobile warfare. The structural problems ran so deep that even brilliant leadership couldn't overcome them. More critically for our story, the disaster forces Hitler's hand. Throughout autumn 1940, the Führer has resisted Italian requests for German military assistance in North Africa. He views the Mediterranean as Italy's sphere, preferring to concentrate German resources on the planned invasion of the Soviet Union. But by February 1941, Italy's collapse threatens Axis credibility. If Britain conquers Libya, they'll threaten Italy's southern flank and potentially knock Mussolini from power. Hitler cannot allow his allies complete humiliation. Reluctantly, furiously, Hitler orders the creation of a specialized force to stabilize North Africa, the Deutsches Afrika Korps. To command it, he selects a rising star known for aggressive leadership and unorthodox tactics, Generalleutnant Erwin Rommel. The decision, made almost casually in February 1941, will transform North Africa into one of World War II's most famous theaters and create one of history's most celebrated military rivalries. Operation Compass proves that audacity and operational skill can overcome raw numbers. O'Connor's campaign becomes a textbook example taught in military academies worldwide, demonstrating principles of surprise, exploitation, and relentless pursuit. The 7th Armored Division earns its Desert Rats nickname and begins building a legend that will sustain it through years of brutal combat. British morale, desperately needing good news after months of defensive fighting, soars. The human cost, while light for the British, is significant for Italy. Beyond the 130,000 prisoners, men who will spend years in POW camps, lies the psychological blow to fascist prestige. Mussolini's dream of Mediterranean empire lies shattered in the Western Desert. His army, supposedly the heirs of Roman legions, has been humiliated by a smaller force. The ultimate casualty count for Operation Compass. British and Commonwealth forces suffer 1,900 casualties killed, wounded, missing. Italian forces lose approximately 3,000 killed, 130,000 captured, and countless wounded. The mathematical disparity, 68, one in prisoners alone, tells the story of a military catastrophe virtually without precedent. But the greater consequence unfolds across the Mediterranean in German ports. There, in early March 1941, Erwin Rommel watches his Afrika Korps load onto transport ships. He carries orders to defend Tripoli, hold the line, prevent further Italian collapse. Nothing more. Rommel, however, has never been good at following defensive orders. He looks at the desert and sees not a barrier but an opportunity. He looks at the British forces, now weakened by Churchill's Greek adventure, and sees vulnerability. The British have won a stunning victory and opened a door they cannot walk through due to strategic necessity elsewhere. The Germans are arriving with fresh troops, better equipment, and a commander who will rewrite desert warfare doctrine. O'Connor, the architect of triumph, will soon be captured in a forward reconnaissance gone wrong. Wavell will find his theater stripped of resources at the moment he needs them most. The Desert War is about to truly begin. The easy victories are over. The real test, against an enemy who studies British tactics, respects British soldiers, and commands forces designed for mobile warfare, approaches with the inevitability of a desert sandstorm. That road is now open, and it leads not to Tripoli's conquest but to years of brutal, swaying combat across North Africa's furnace. The dice have been thrown, the stage is set, and Erwin Rommel is about to make his entrance.